I'm Bill Kassel, and this is Free Expression. This program is all about conveying the Christian message from a Catholic point of view and defending the liberty which makes it possible to do that. We look at how Christianity gets reduced to a cultural phenomenon, how education is approached seriously, and what we can learn from the first 3 chapters of Genesis. Join us, sit back and enjoy some free expression. There's no question that Donald Trump's second term shows definite signs of a much more congenial attitude toward America's traditional religious character, certainly more than we saw during the Biden years. But while the president has gone out of his way to express his respect for faith and churches and people's individual beliefs, there's still a big question mark about his own spirituality. Trump's personal background is rather dubious, a point his adversaries raised constantly during the campaign. It was a handy way to paint his Christian supporters as hypocrites for backing him. What does Trump believe? Is he a sincere Christian, even if one who doesn't wear his faith on his sleeve? Or is he just a cultural Christian, somebody who appreciates the trappings of our Christianity-rooted society, but who has no firm loyalty to its central beliefs? And does it matter one way or the other? John Horvat is Vice President of Tradition, Family, and Property, an organization dedicated to the defense of traditional faith and morality. He's been pondering the issue of cultural Christianity. He's been with us before, and he's here again to examine just where we stand as the Trump administration unfolds. John, good to talk with you again.
Great to be back on the show.
Donald Trump strikes me as a man on a journey, even if that journey has been somewhat meandering and he hasn't quite reached his faith destination. What's your impression of him?
Well, I really can't judge what's inside. All I can do is look at the phenomena that's taking place, that there's a lot of people that have been called, it's not a term I coined, but it's being used out there, cultural Christians. And the idea is that religion is a cultural thing and not a religious thing, and it's something that you can identify with, but it doesn't have those deep foundations that are very much a part of our faith. And so I think he participates in this phenomenon.
You recently put out an article that saw a danger in cultural Christianity. What is that?
Well, the danger is that Christianity does mean something. It has its rules, it has its morals, and it has a whole. You proclaim something, and you also it's oriented toward God. With the cultural Christian, it becomes something much less, and you have people who actually don't practice the faith, or don't practice a moral code, or believe in things that are contrary to Christianity, yet they can take this label, cultural Christian, and run with it. And so it dilutes the Christian message very much, and I think that is the big danger.
I guess the question that comes to mind is, isn't cultural Christianity better than no Christianity?
Well, it depends, because you have people that, not so much here in the United States, but in other places where this idea is taking hold, where you'll have people who support abortion, same-sex marriage, things that we have fought against in the culture war here in the United States, tooth and nail, and yet they'll sport some of the trappings of Christianity, but they will represent the Christian position in a contrary way.
If you look at the new administration, as I said earlier, Trump's own religious profile is a little obscure, and he's surrounded himself with people who I guess have similar characteristics, people like Elon Musk. He doesn't strike me as a man of explicit faith, but yet these folks have a vision. They seek a return to constitutionality or some sort of moral rectitude, I guess, even if it's not explicitly religious. I guess the question is it possible to bring about the kinds of reforms that Trump suggests and that his people seem to be working for without an explicit religious commitment?
Well, that's where I have a problem because as a Catholic, I believe that religion is not just a cultural thing, a thing that's nice to have, that I've always been.
Right.
But religion is something that invokes God and the worship of God. And it presupposes that God intervenes in history, that God helps his people, that it's not a purely theoretical thing, that God will bless the nation. And the cultural Christian deals with these situations by saying, well, we just think something like God, but we really don't believe in a God as such that intervenes in history. And so we're pretty much put on the same level of those who don't believe in God. You know, we've lowered the bar so much that we give away our highest advantage, which is the belief in God and the worship of God and the expectation of help from God.
A country like the United States, though, embraces a great variety of people from different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. How do we strike a balance in which we can accommodate all of these different kinds of folks, their different moral perspectives and everything else? That seems to me a pretty difficult challenge.
The church has a solution for that in a certain sense because we believe in what is called natural law, which is very much not liked by the secular world. But natural law is the idea that there are certain moral principles and moral laws that exist in our nature. We know them because we are human. It's what one author says, it's the law we can't not know. We know that killing is always wrong. We know that lying is always wrong. We know that stealing is always wrong. So there is a foundation that everyone shares just by the mere fact they are human. And those are the things by which we can work together. We can accommodate. If a religion, believes in killing people and believes in lying and stealing, obviously that's something that would not work toward the common good and would be harmful to the Commonwealth. And so, those are things that obviously are illegal, so to speak, and could not be accommodated.
What are your feelings about the situation of the country right now? We've entered this new era, apparently a new era. We're certainly seeing a different approach to the morality of governing than we saw in the Biden years. Are you optimistic?
Well, I'm definitely encouraged by some of the things we've seen. Of course, the restrictions on abortion, the rollback of the woke agenda, the DEI and ESG mandates that are now being abandoned. I think these are all extremely positive elements that have been in the working for a couple years. It's not something that automatically just came about out of the blue, but it's certainly the new administration is a catalyst that is really doing a lot of damage to these very harmful programs.
Do you think Trump will be able to carry this forward, or will they sandbag him?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think he definitely is working in ways that is throwing the other side for a loop. And so let's see what happens. It's not an easy agenda.
Some years ago, you wrote a book called Return to Order, in which you dealt with some of these concepts. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Return to Order is a book that helps people understand better where we went wrong in our economy and our culture, and showing how the main problem is not an economic problem, but a moral problem inside Western civilization, Western man, that desires a civilization that is what I called frenetically intemperate. We want everything now, instantly, without regard for the consequences, and as a result, we get into a lot of trouble. I mean, our society is in a lot of trouble. People's lives just become extremely chaotic as a result. And that if we really want to get back to where we should be, we need to return to that Christian order. It's something that I think is very much reflected in the Fatima message. If we don't really take into consideration the Fatima message of a need for conversion and prayer and for sacrifices, we're not going to really get to the core of the thing. We may make some progress on some issues, but not the real issues that are so necessary for our sanctification.
The book is still available. Where can people find out about it?
You can get a copy at returntoorder.org. There's a special edition that you'll see there. It's a free copy of a paperback edition, the special edition that we're offering for a limited time.
John Horvat, Vice President of Tradition, Family, and Property. Thanks a lot for taking time to talk with us.
It's been great.
Why do we send our children to school? It's a question that seems almost silly to ask. Well, kids go to school because they have to go to school, right? They got to learn stuff. Okay, well, what is it that we think is important for them to learn in school? That's a more provocative question. Well, they got to learn basic life skills, how to read, how to count, stuff they'll need to make a living. But is that all? Jonathan Bishop teaches at a Catholic school in New Hampshire. He recently wrote an article for the online journal Catholic Exchange in which he questioned whether current teaching in both public and private schools might be leaving out some very important stuff that can affect the course of a child's entire life. John, thanks very much for taking time to share your thoughts with us.
Bill, thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
In that Catholic Exchange piece, you observed that most schools today are focused on what's called career readiness, and that focus can be extremely narrow. What's that all about?
As a culture, we've decided that education strictly exists to get people jobs. Now, there's nothing wrong with that viewpoint, but I think we're losing something very important when we forget that education is about formation. When we sort of have this narrow focus of getting people positions, we jettison things that were really taken for granted for a long time, and we view things that were serious as something trivial now.
What kinds of things do you think we're leaving out?
I think we're not teaching books, great books. We're not asking students to consider deep questions. Who am I? What am I called to do? Who am I called to be? And again, that engagement with the past, with great ideas and great books. And again, I think it leaves students with a hunger for meaning, which is why I think so many students today perhaps feel so aimless.
I'm a product of public school, although it was a very, very long time ago when I was in school. I can recall having some fairly serious discussions in class. I guess sometimes they were spontaneous, sometimes they sprang out of what the lessons contained. Is that no longer happening?
I think it is, but it depends very much on where you go. I think as a culture we have turned education into this kind of political football where we want to impose particular political ideologies from either side into the conversation, when again it really needs to be about engaging great ideas, engaging great books, and the kind of communion that comes from that.
Who's driving this trend? Is it the schools themselves? Is it the unions? Is it the expectations of parents? I mean, moms and dads want their kids to get a good job and do well in life. What's the source of this?
I think it's a multifaceted thing. I think, first of all, there's the broader question of the humanities. I think a lot of people have decided that these are useless subjects that really are not worthy of study because, again, they don't seem to directly correlate to getting jobs. I do think that there are certain ideologues, perhaps in universities and others, who claim that great books are not worthy of study because they may not speak to today's people, today's students. And then there is, again, people who just say education needs to totally be directed to career, so we just need to restructure it accordingly. So, again, I think it's a multifaceted approach.
Does this problem exist primarily in public schools? How do Catholic schools, for instance, stand? Can you expect a higher level of content and seriousness in a Catholic environment?
I think it depends on where you are. Ideally, you would expect a higher level of seriousness in a Catholic school, and I say this as a theology teacher because Catholic schools should be centered on truth, the truth, Jesus. But again, it just very much depends on where you are.
Well, this sounds like a cultural trend that's probably been pretty long building. How do you turn this ship around?
I think we have to recognize that, first of all, our students do hunger for deep things. We need to have a kind of cultural conversation rather than that directs the classroom back to what is serious. One of the other components of this is that we have sometimes decided that difficult things should be pushed away because students may no longer be capable of that. I found that's not true. I think students are perhaps more capable than they ever have been. So I think the conversation just needs to be directed to it's like your introduction. What is education for? Is it for a job or is it for formation? So if we get back to the idea that we are forming citizens, we're forming people, and we are participating in this great conversation from long ago and bringing it forward, I think that would do a lot of good for the country.
Where should the pressure be applied? Is it the teachers who can turn this around? Is it the administrators who can pressure the teachers? Is it the parents? How do we start?
I think there's a culture of, in addition to this kind of crisis of seriousness that I'm calling it, there's a culture of nervousness. I don't think it's necessarily the fault of any teacher, but I think we live in such a climate today that can be litigious, perhaps offending people. And I think if we actually give people the freedom to engage different ideas in the classroom, students, teachers, and then again, just sort of back off from things, I think that would do a world of good.
Jonathan Bishop, thank you very much for taking time to share your thoughts. Everybody shakes their heads at the schools and wonders what's going on or what isn't going on. I think this is something that people care about, but they may not know how to approach it. So reading your article might be a good start.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill. I appreciate it.
Monica Miller is an author, speaker, and activist. She's one of the most visible leaders of the pro-life movement, and all of her faith involvements have led her to approach Scripture in a way that gets beyond questions of literalism or historicity. She's been with us before, and she's here now to share her insights into the Bible and its importance in our lives. Monica, good to talk to you again.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be with you, Bill.
Genesis paints a vivid picture of how we feeble people began our long journey on the road to God. You have a book from Catholic Answers Press, In the Beginning, Critical Lessons of Our World from the First 3 Chapters of Genesis. Why is Genesis so important?
Genesis, and in particular the first 3 chapters, set the stage for the new covenant and the coming of our Lord. And so to understand the worldview, the anthropology, the spiritual lessons that are embedded in the first 3 chapters, as I said, sets the stage for the covenant of redemption ultimately.
Well, now there's a couple thousand years between Genesis and the advent of Christ. How do you bridge that gap? What are those things which carry you from point A to point B?
Well, history belongs to God, so bridging the gap is really not that difficult because this is, as I argue in my book, time and history is the arena of God's saving action. So it's one story, regardless of the time span.
Okay, what is it that you focus on in the book? What are some of the lessons that you say are to be found in Genesis?
Well, what I want to do is help the reader appreciate that beginning with Judaism and the Jewish narrative that we find in the Old Testament, Judaism is doing something new. It is doing something revolutionary. It is changing our worldview. And what I want to unpack is the relationship between God and the human person in relationship to the world of nature, the created order. And that's why I take the reader through what I consider kind of a fun thing to do, is to make that comparison between the anthropology and the cosmology, I'm going to use that terminology, that we find in the book of Genesis, in comparison to what really is an ancient, pagan, pessimistic, dualistic worldview. So the reader's going to see, wow, and as I say in the introduction to the book, ideas matter. And so what kind of a religion do you want? And depending on your choice, it's really, really going to make a difference in terms of understanding the dignity of the human person, the relationship of God to the human race, and the relationship of God to the world that he has created.
Now, people will argue till the cows come home about whether creation happened in 6 literal days or if it happened over eons of time. How do you understand the creation story?
Well, certainly that creation is directly coming from the hand of God. I think to get bogged down in the 6-day narrative that God created the world literally in 6 24-hour days, in some ways misses the ultimate and the more important, in some respects, lessons that are embedded in Genesis chapter 1. And I have no problem believing that God created the world in 6 days. But if we get into those weeds, I think we're missing the real purpose and focus of Genesis chapter 1. And Genesis chapter 1 is ultimately a divinely inspired apologetic, a polemic against that ancient pagan worldview, polytheism and the war in the cosmos and the denigration of the human person, and maybe we can even add the denigration of women that we find in the ancient pagan narratives. Genesis chapter 1 is straightening all that out. It's staggering, really. We probably, of course, take it for granted, but look at it from the ancient Babylonian point of view, okay, or the ancient Greco-Roman point of view. Genesis chapter 1 does something absolutely amazing and new. It spends a lot of time, Bill. The most verses are dedicated to this, coming in only second to the creation of man and woman. The sacred author spends a great deal of time talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars, right? And what are they for, right? The sun and the moon and the stars. God created the sun and the moon and the stars to mark the seasons and to separate day from night. And he repeats it a couple of times. It's kind of redundant, really. But Genesis is driving home the point that God made these orbs and stars in the sky, meaning what? They are not gods. God is sovereign over them, and we really have a kind of, frankly, a scientific definition of what they're for, in contrast to the ancient pagan divinization of the cosmos. If you were an ancient pagan believer, this would be heresy to you. Okay, you're fooling around with my religion. Okay, but that's just the point. The Genesis chapter 1 is taking us in a completely new and positive, optimistic direction when it comes to the meaning of the planet that we live on.
Now, what about the garden story? What do you draw from that, where you have man and woman living in this idyllic setting and then falling from grace?
Right. Well, Genesis chapter 2, when all is said and done, Bill, is about the meaning of human sexuality and the meaning of marriage. This is an anthropology, right? It is not good for the man to be alone. And so we have the creation of the quote-unquote helpmate, suitable partner, a helper fit for him, and so on and so forth. The translation of the original Semitic Hebrew term Ezer, E-Z-E-R, that refers to the creation of the woman is created to bring the man into human communion. And his first speech, the first human speech, is a celebration of the other in relationship to myself. This one, at last, is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And so we have that, Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So Genesis chapter 2, as I said, is about the meaning of being male and female. And then I would argue, frankly, that the world is created for marriage and the founding of the family. This is what this planet is for. And so that's why I spend time in my book explaining how a lot of this beauty, this order, this truth is falling apart all around us. and we need to appreciate our own current problems, and the corrective is already there in the first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis.
Yeah, in our time in particular, there is so much confusion about these basics. What is a man? What is a woman? What is marriage?
Right, thank you. Right.
Well, now the book has been out for a few months. What sort of a reception is it getting?
It's getting, I think, a very good reception, and there are a number of reviews that are still pending. The National Catholic Register will be bringing out a review soon, as well as New Oxford Review and a couple of other places. And here's the thing, Bill, about this book. When I wrote it, I also envisioned, I had hoped, that this would be a book that you could give to somebody who isn't even a believer. Why? Because irrespective of whether a person has religious faith, this book will show non-believers why the Judeo-Christian religious tradition is superior. Of all the religions in the world, it is this religious tradition that protects and defends the dignity of the human person. I would even want non-believers to at least appreciate that that's what's going on when we're talking about Judeo-Christian religion.
The book is In the Beginning, Critical Lessons of Our World from the First 3 Chapters of Genesis by Monica Miller. Where can people find out more about it?
Well, I think they can simply go to Catholic Answers to get the book easily enough. If you go to my website, which is Pro-Life Society, no hyphens, prolifesociety.com, there's a link to the book on our website as well.
Well, thanks very much for taking time to talk about all of this.
And thank you. It's been a privilege.
Be with us next time when we explore other aspects of religious communication and look deeper into the great Christian heritage of free expression. Free Expression with Bill Kassel is a production of Good Shepherd Catholic Radio and Company Publications, where good books, good music, and good radio are always good company. Dan Curris provided technical assistance. Theme and incidental music are by Dan Adam. The program was produced and directed by Bill Kassel. This is Good Shepherd Catholic Radio.